We're almost there, end of the day. To close out the day, I was hoping this session would start at 4:20, but come on, you saw that joke coming. We're going to talk about the overview of cannabis opportunities for First Nations. How many communities here have had a plethora of cannabis startups, and everyone who has an idea, anybody who has an idea to do with cannabis or hemp, come to their First Nation asking to do business? And you say, what was the question? How many people have been approached to do business in cannabis in their communities? It's the big talk of the town. It's a new industry, a lot of different opportunities and opinions within the industry, especially when it comes to our communities. And so we're pleased to have with us Wes Sam. Wes Sam is the founder and executive chair of Nations, a cannabis production company in Burns Lake. Wes is also chair of the Joint Working Group on the legalization and regulation of non-medical cannabis in BC. He's also the former chief of Burns Lake Band, a successful business owner, entrepreneur, and the former president of the largest provincial community forest organization, among other things, including being a city councillor for the city of Burns Lake and a deputy mayor there as well. So please welcome to the stage Wes Sam.
I forgot to put in there also, I am a sandwich artist. I own a Subway restaurant up in Burns Lake. I'd like to say good afternoon to everybody. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be gathering on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. It's been an exciting week. I did a presentation at the World Indigenous Business Forum, my first. That was a lot of people. I've never addressed that many people before, but it was quite exciting to see people from all over the world. In the past few days, we've met with other First Nations that are doing what I am doing, which is they have working on licenses to produce cannabis for Canada. So I have many meetings coming up based on the many meetings I had this week, so that was quite exciting. Let's see if I could get this right here. I'm going to start off with opportunities. I'm going to talk about the opportunities and challenges that come with the growth of the cannabis industry in BC and Canada. I'm getting this right. As you know, medical cannabis use was legalized in 2001 in Canada. The Federal Cannabis Act came into effect October 17th, 2018, making Canada the second country in the world to formally legalize cultivation, consumption, and cannabis for the recreation market. At this time, there are a number of estimates about the value of the Canadian cannabis market. Conservative estimates suggest the value of the Canadian market is projected to be $8.7 billion in Canada, and the medical market by 2020 will be roughly $2.3 billion. We're talking some big numbers here, very, very big numbers for production for cannabis. It's a new industry, and we're hoping to have more First Nations involvement throughout British Columbia and Canada. This is a resource that we can do together. It's indoor, it's controlled. In my community in Burns Lake, it's where the Beetle Epidemic started. I don't know, most of you, if you know about what that is, but our forests were 70% pine. It's dead, so that resource is gone. Most of the First Nations resources are either dead or dying or already taken. So this is an industry that we can absolutely have a hand in and take control of, and I encourage that. Since the legalization of cannabis 1 year ago, there are approximately 232 licenses across Canada with varying licenses. There's different licenses. There's some for cultivation, processing, sales, and exporting. There's only one other First Nations company that I know of, or our company know of, and I believe they were one of the first in Canada to get their license, and that's in Ontario. In my meetings this week, I was excited to hear there are two others. one in Winnipeg and another one here in BC. I claimed at the World Indigenous Business Forum that we'd be the second, but it looks like there's a race for second, so we're about 4 months out from our production facility. Licensed producers are able to sell medical cannabis online with a physician's referral. The only way to legally purchase recreational cannabis online in BC right now is through the BC government and at the liquor cannabis branch. Other provinces across Canada have their own rules for purchasing online. As of May 2019, we just had over 360 legal licensed retail locations throughout Canada. In BC, there are 83 non-medical retail stores across the province and approximately 25 in Ontario. There's a current shortfall of cannabis being grown for the growth of the market. However, the projections are showing this shortfall will improve more as more licenses are approved, like ours will be in 4 months. The biggest concern is getting access to cannabis. There's a huge lack of retail locations in many provinces, including BC. If you look at our neighbors to the in Alberta, they had 128 million in sales last year, and I believe BC was 18 million or something less than that. The Alberta government has really been pushing and backing and supporting this industry. We'd like to see more support here in British Columbia when it comes to finances and what have you, and more government support. But based on that, like markets in Colorado, compared to Ontario, we estimate that Ontario itself would need 1,400 store locations. The landscape is one in which a period of growth and change. New regulations are expected this month. The legalization of edibles is coming our way, as everybody knows, end of October. I know everybody's excited for that. So, are we excited? Come on. For people who don't smoke, some people like to eat. So there's edibles, candy, baked goods, cannabis extracts, cannabis topicals, ointments, oils, and makeup. The topicals itself is very interesting for the health industry itself, and the ointments and oils. It's predicted to be right now 2.7 billion just in Canada, but worldwide this product is going to be into the billions for skin products and what have you. We haven't even talked about the pet industry or anything like that with extracts for CBD for putting into these products. I'm going to talk a little bit about the joint working group. In 2018, the BC government invited the province's First Nations Leadership Council to establish a joint working group on legalization and regulation of non-medical cannabis in BC. FNLC representatives include the BC Assembly of First Nations, First Nations Summit, Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and 7 Indigenous Nation community representatives who bring technical expertise. The First Nations Health Authority Council and First Nations Health Authority have also participated on this committee. The province of BC is represented by the BC Cannabis Legalization Regulation Secretariat, as well as provincial representatives from across the government and a representative from Health Canada. The First Nations Leadership Council is pursuing specific actions that have been identified by First Nations working group representatives and expressed in resolutions at the Assembly of First Nations. These actions include economic development capacity. That is a huge issue here, especially for First Nations, and any resource that First Nations have tried to enter, forestry, mining, or what have you, the economics has always come to, it halts your project. Capital is hard to get, especially in this industry. We're looking at separate and supported licensing processes, data and monitoring, public education and awareness, jurisdiction, revenue sharing, and health considerations and impacts. This is a great opportunity for First Nations to participate in this new economy to help improve your communities and economies and create jobs, provide viable natural health care alternatives for serious health issues and conditions that are prevalent in many First Nations communities, such as PTSD. Ensure that all First Nations have safe, supported, holistic, natural, high-quality medical and recreational cannabis. Although growing and selling cannabis can be a great way for our people to improve our economic empowerment, there are other opportunities available in the industry, including growing and extracting hemp. We've just received our hemp license a few weeks ago. One of our plans with hemp is well, farming hemp, of course, but for CBD, there is literally hundreds and thousands of acres of First Nations land out there that could be utilized in growing of this product. As you know, if you don't know, hemp does not have THC. If it does, it's very low. But there's numerous products that you can get out of this plant itself. One of the most valuable to me, in my mind, in my view, and a lot of people's view, is CBD. Other opportunities are opening your own retail stores, on or off reserve, partnerships with other licensed producers, so you don't have to go through the lengthy process of getting your own license. And also there's the opportunities of micro-production facilities. The large LPs, such as ours that we're doing, are tens of thousands of square feet and are very costly, into the tens of millions. The micro-production facilities for some nations could be an easier way to get in. They're less cost. They're 2,150 square feet per unit, and you're allowed up to 8 per business. We're currently looking and talking with some First Nations that would like to take that route and partner and work and go forward. So there's viable ways to get into it. You don't have to go into the large LPs. We don't know how many different opportunities. There's other opportunities coming. This market is exciting. It's huge, so huge. The cannabis industry, in many respects, is still in its infancy. Many look at the opportunity with rose-colored glasses. They don't recognize the challenges, but as co-founder of the company that is making its way through this process, the challenges are significant. Securing investment was one that, like I said earlier, was a challenge. We've raised all our capital privately. It's important to have a solid business plan, investment backing, as the licensing process requires a facility to be built before you get your license approval. So for a $15, $20 million facility, you're basically not even really guaranteed that license. So it's a pretty strenuous, it's been challenging going forward, but we have an excellent team at Nations, and we will have our license in approximately 4 months. Securing land and city approvals for indoor and outdoor growing, finding large enough right space for cultivation can be a deterrent. You could also use your First Nations lands, working through the federal system for a legal way to produce. Obtaining the license to grow and sell is not easy. It's time-consuming and is a multi-step process. There are many checks and balances with Health Canada to ensure safety and security. Some licensees have waited up for 2 to 3 years plus. Some have been as quick as a year, year and a half. So it can be lengthy. I believe the application process itself is well over 500 pages. Not unlike alcohol or tobacco, there are several restrictions associated with marketing and advertising of cannabis that can be a hindrance to success. We are quite limited on what we can put on labeling and packaging in Canada right now, but it's only year one. We expect that to change. There's a lot of lobbying going on right now in Ottawa to change packaging and the allowability of different logos and what have you. Branding is very important. In order to stand out from the competition, branding is extremely important. Indigenous cannabis companies need to differentiate ourselves from other cannabis companies. But if you can address all of these challenges, the time is now to get involved in this industry. It can help the First Nations improve our economies and invest into future opportunities, what have you. The time is absolutely now. If you're thinking about it, please look into it a little more. There's a lot of gain to be had if done correctly. Do your due diligence, whoever's talking to you. There's a lot of people that we've partnered with and have been approached. There's a right way and a wrong way in this business, just like any. I'll be happy to answer any questions after this. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Our next presenter is Councillor Ken Watts, or Wahmeesh, from Tseshaht First Nation. Ken was born and raised in Port Alberni in Tseshaht First Nation territory. He is the eldest son of late George Watts, and his mother is Matilda Atleo. Wahmeesh is looking forward to serving the Tseshaht First Nation as a council member with a focus on economic development, governance, land management, and I'm going to guess pot, and creating better working relationships with other governments and organizations. Can you put your hands together for Wes, please?
Chu uklama Wahmeesh Tseshaht Hikha Mamuk Tseshaht Council Uhukwach Eksu Matilda Atleo Tseshaht Uksu Uhukwitach Nu Eksu George Watts Tseshaht Mitma Kleko Hatwea Musjim Musqueam Squamish Tsleil-Waututh Kleko Regional Chief Teegee and PCFN staff. As mentioned, my name is Ken Watts. I'm a council member for Tseshaht First Nation, the son of the late George Watts, and my mother's Matilda Atleo. Introduced to a family relative actually just earlier, and I want to take the time to thank Regional Chief Teegee for this forum, and how about a round of applause for all the staff that put all of this together this past few days. I know a lot of work goes into events such as this, so I just want to thank you all. So as mentioned, my name is Ken Watts. I'm a council member for Tseshaht. I've been on for roughly 2 years now in a by-election. And I'm here to talk a bit about BC's first Indigenous, First Nation owned and operated, provincially licensed retail cannabis store. It's a long one, but there's other stores that are opening and operating in British Columbia that are either outside of the provincial regime, or there's others that are owned by individual people. We are the first that is owned by a nation. We opened last month, and it was a pretty exciting day for our community, and I'll share a little more on that when we get there. So first I want to start about the opportunity. So for those of you who don't know where Port Alberni is, it's on the west coast of Vancouver Island. You have to drive through our community, our reserve, to get to a place called Tofino and Ucluit, one of the biggest tourism destinations in British Columbia. You cannot get there by land without driving through our community. And so in our community, we have a gas station on the edge of the reserve before you head out to Tofino. It's the last gas station you can purchase. So now people always joke around about gas and grass in Tseshaht, but it's a good opportunity that we saw in front of us. I want to quickly talk about the process and how we got here. I think that's what I was asked to do, is talk a bit about this, our experience and some lessons learned. The first thing that we learned is that this needed to be driven by community. There's so much misconceptions about cannabis that it was important to inform our community. So the direction to explore this opportunity came from our community, through our CPP, through social media, through community meetings. There was always mention of cannabis, and our community said, you know what, we want to explore this, please bring us more information. So they gave us direction to explore and inform them. We engaged our community members with levels of government, including provincial, federal, both in the health and the licensing side. And then we had local governments also talk a bit about what they're doing on the licensing and bylaws. And then we also provided an opportunity for community to hear from potential partners. They ultimately gave us direction to enter the industry. I was actually one of our best attended community meetings of the whole year next to fisheries. For those of you who know the West Coast, fish is an important thing to our community, so it's clear that it's a priority for our community. And then we moved on to finalizing our partners, and I want to talk a bit about the licensing or asserting, because I know that's the hot topic amongst First Nations. Do we just assert our right, or do we go through the licensing regime? Ultimately, our community decided what was best was to go through the licensing regime for a number of factors. One is around capital, around financing. In order to access financing, we had to go through the licensing route. New Charnoth Economic Development Corporation, where many New Charnoth receive their financing, they required us to be going through the legal route, the provincial route, to get a license. And there's a reason why I put the picture there about fishing. Our community's no stranger to asserting our right. We've been asserting our right to fish and sell fish for decades, and we've actually had guns drawn on our community members, and it came to some tense points in our lives. So we're not foreign to asserting our right, and we'll continue to do so when we think it's necessary. But for this particular process, we decided to go through the licensing route. And also because we plan on entering cultivation. So we thought it'd be really hard to get in cultivation if you're just asserting your right going against the provincial government. So we secured a space, we applied for a license, we've opened, we're addressing some issues now, and we've got a meeting with Minister Farnworth at the end of the month to address. And I want to mention the last part, which I think is important around governance, is I think regardless if you plan on opening a cannabis dispensary store or getting into cultivation, that I think when we govern, we need to effectively create laws. I think whether you're doing laws or not, this is a perfect example of a good place to start in asserting your right as Indigenous nations. So I want to talk a bit about our team and how we got to where we are. We're not experts in everything, and our nation aren't experts in cannabis, and we don't go around pretending to be. So we worked with a consulting company who owns 8 dispensaries on Vancouver Island. They created a separate group on consulting. The group's called Purple Camas Consulting. So there's dispensaries on Vancouver Island called Trees Dispensaries. So they were owning and operating prior to the licensing, and so they were really familiar with the process and applying and licensing and how to run the store. So we worked with them. We have a great group of staff, from our executive director to our finance team, and then our staff. You can see in the photo there, we have 7 employees or 6 employees. 5 are community members, and 1 is not, but he's planning on mentoring our community member to eventually take over. We found a space actually next to our gas station. It's funny, it was actually an old house, and then it was our office, so we kept our capital costs down for now by just utilizing space that was already there. And sorry, how do I go back? Oh, there we go. So just a bit about the store. So there's some photos of the interior. It's called Orange Bridge Cannabis. You can see the space there and on the highway, and you can see the fish in the windows. You have to frost your windows. If you have a license, you can't be able to see inside. So we used a piece of our logo on the windows, utilizing our First Nations artwork as our marketing. And those cabinets there are meant to be able to be disassembled for when we expand and build a new store. A bit about the logo, and you talked a bit about branding. We had a community member do this design. You could see it in the print that I'm holding up. We allowed him to display the sign and unveil it. And I won't go into the details about what it is, but he has a deep connection of the fish that are below the bridge, the Thunderbird above it, and we've created a new brand of Orange Bridge Cannabis. And as you know, in many local businesses throughout British Columbia, they're utilizing local historical landmarks in their business name. So Orange Bridge, the Orange Bridge is a historical, the not so orange bridge is a historical piece of history in Port Alberni infrastructure. This bridge was actually orange my whole childhood, and then it was interesting because it was a really ugly orange actually. And I think it was government that painted it because there was a bunch of other bridges on Vancouver Island that they painted the exact same orange. And then ultimately it changed to gray. So people still know it as the Orange Bridge, even though it's not orange, it's gray now. So, and that's the beginning of when you enter our reserve, it's all of our territory, but when you cross that bridge is where our reserve starts. You can see our administration building there. So that's why we chose the name Orange Bridge. So I want to talk a bit about the issues that we've been facing. and we have faced in the processing and are getting into our application. One is the length of time and resources it takes to apply. It's not cheap, takes time, and you need to be patient for a retail license. Two is, this was probably our biggest frustration on the day we opened, is for anybody that works in a cannabis store has to have a worker qualification. They have to go through this process and apply. The day we opened, we had 6 employees and only one of our staff was actually certified to run the till. And that was because of government backlog, and I'll get more to that on my frustrations there, but suggestions I have. One thing I think people aren't talking enough of, that Cowichan raised, is that the provincial government is the distributor. They regulate the industry, but they're also selling in the industry as well. I don't think we're not raising that profile up enough. The province shouldn't be trying to get more money into their own coffers. They should be supporting local businesses, whether it be First Nations or not. And I'd never understood why they started opening up provincial stores, and I really think we should have stepped up and we should have opposed that as First Nations from the very beginning. They should be supporting us and other local businesses, not themselves. Another issue is gray market stores. I put that in because there may be other nations that assert the right and are near us, but right now there was other gray market stores operating in our territory. So our members are asking, why should we apply for a license if the neighbor down the road doesn't have to apply for a license? He can operate however he wants without one. So there's a community safety team that goes around and shuts down these stores, but it was ultimately a big issue when we first opened. And again, we shared this earlier outside, the province is the middleman. We don't actually deal directly with the licensed producers that they have agreements with. We deal with the liquor and cannabis distribution branch. So when we want to make an order, we go through them. So they've created this middleman now that it has to go through the distribution branch rather than us dealing directly with an LP and getting our product from there. It's getting into more hands, it's taking longer, and it's costing more. So we need to eliminate that middleman, which is the province and the distribution branch. One is the cost of the product. It's not cheap. To be honest, it's one of our biggest complaints of our visitors is they can go visit their neighbor where they used to purchase their cannabis from, or the gray market store, and get it for half the price. Other thing is advertising. I won't get into that. It's a huge frustration. Even when I showed you our store there, we can't put a billboard up on the highway according to the province of our store. That goes against their laws. So there's huge advertising restrictions that are very frustrating. And I'm gonna make this plug here is around the product. For those of you that have went into a provincial store, they come from the LC liquor distribution branch, and they're these sealed containers. And we've had members saying, how could we say we're so concerned with the environment and we're selling these products in these plastic, we're creating more waste than we should be, and we're using these plastic products that we're getting out into the community now through cannabis. So here's a potential solution that, again, I don't think people are talking enough about. In the Cannabis Control Licensing Act, there's one whole chapter about First Nations and Indigenous nations. It's with regards to agreement section 119. I'll just read it quickly. Subject to subsection 2 and the approval of the Lieutenant Governor and Council, the Minister may, on behalf of the government, enter into agreements with an Indigenous nation with respect to cannabis. So we're meeting Minister Farnworth to hopefully enact this and enter into an agreement to address all those issues that I just talked about. As also revenue sharing is another big piece we talk about, people selling cannabis in their territory. Why wasn't revenue sharing ever on the table first? We're talking about gaming, and we've got these new revenue sharing agreements. Cannabis should have been dealt with as well. So just in closing, I'll talk a bit about the future. So this is for those of you that are from Vancouver Island, there's a nice building. So we are planning on building a new facility once we've finished our financing and paying off our financing. We're going to build a new facility up beside our store. We are going to get into cultivation. Our community directed us. They said, yes, we want you to get into retail, but we also want to get into cultivation. And then, again, I'm glad you mentioned micro cultivation. That's probably our plan. We're not going to get into the big tens of $1 million facility. We're going to start with a micro license first. And I'll say Port Alberni's not a very cold place, so we are considering going into an outdoor facility rather than a large indoor facility. It's not tropical by any means as Port Alberni, but it's not very cold. We don't get a lot of snow in Port Alberni. And so just in closing, again, the last, if you could see in the middle there, forestry and fisheries are our biggest economic drivers for our community. We make a lot of our own source revenue from forestry and fisheries. For those of you that know, I heard Chris talk about adapting to climate change. You can see that forestry and fisheries have been hit really hard, and we should be concerned. We should be concerned for our kids' future when it comes to natural resources, and we need to act, and we need to think outside the box. And then our last big driver is our store. We do quite well with our gas station, but we're hoping that cannabis is our fourth biggest driver and for our economy. So with that, I thank you for listening, and I appreciate all of you that stick around on a Friday at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock here. So, klako, choo.
Thanks, Ken. So before we go to questions from the audience, I want to know, after you stop in gas and grass, does that bridge turn orange again? You got stuff that good? No. So we do have time for questions. We have about 8 minutes here in the schedule, so we can have a good conversation here. I have a lot of questions, if the audience doesn't. So any questions out there? You guys can grab the mics here. We got one here and one back in the corner. Go ahead, sir.
You mentioned advertising restrictions. Does social media fall under that?
Does social media fall under the advertising restrictions in provincial legislation? Oh, just turn there. Yeah.
Well, they're quite stringent on exactly how you can advertise it, and it's quite risky to what you could do as an LP or a micro. You could actually, I don't know how many ticks you get, but you could lose your license. They are strict in accordance, and I believe you got to watch what you do on social media also. But it is compared to, say, the U.S. I know there's only certain states that allow it. It's still not legal federally, but their advertising. We look like we're from the Stone Age, basically, from what we have. We need to up that. We need to be allowed to have better advertising on our products for when other countries come online, so we can actually compete. But yeah, it is very restricted even to what you can put on social media.
Yeah, and just, really quickly on the retail side, on our website or social media, we can't show the product. We can show the inside of the store. We have to be very careful even on that. So for those of you that are opening, I recommend, and this was support from our consultants, is utilizing the media when you open. Like, word of mouth can be just as good as social media, and especially in smaller towns like Port Alberni. So yeah, we can't show the product on social media or anything. There's a lot of regulations around that.
Thanks for the question. Over here in the corner.
Sorry about that. I'm just wondering, we're doing all this pre-planning for cannabis and everything like that there. A lot of nations, we're getting calls from all these people that want us to do this. But what if Andrew Scheer gets in power and then he just decides that, guess what? Cannabis is going to be illegal again, and guess what? All your guys' plans and all that stuff are shot. What is your guys' opinion on that there? Because it's kind of weird. We're hearing from a lot of conservative people that they don't want the marijuana and all this kind of stuff.
Well, I think it's going off and on. But right now, I can't see that happening, and I sure hope it wouldn't. There has been tens and hundreds of $1 million and millions of dollars invested into LPs, storefronts, whole economies of towns. It's changed small towns. If you look at some towns in Nova Scotia that was absolutely dead, they lost all their economies. It absolutely turned around their economy. There was more spin-offs than you can count. it would be detrimental to that government and to our economy for the national GDP. This is actually going to be in the GDP. It's actually already calculated in there. As I said earlier, it's estimated to be, I think it was $8 or $12 billion, and those are low estimates. We'll learn more as we go, but I can't see myself any government attempting to do that. As a matter of fact, I hope they would try to improve how we can get our products out there and advertise and what have you. So whatever government comes in, I really hope they really support this new emerging industry.
Yeah, and just really quickly, I think I missed it on one of my slides. I showed the revenue for provinces, and I'm glad you shared it. The province of BC is way behind on revenue. They've dropped the ball, I'll be honest. I think as a country, we've dropped the ball. When you look at states like Colorado and Washington, they're bringing hundreds of millions in the local economy, and I think it's the way they've set things up, and I don't think they did their homework, and I don't think they had the right people setting up the legislation. So yeah, I don't consider it, I'm not too worried about it. I think there's a lot of provinces that are behind it, and whether you're First Nations or you're Conservative or NDP, they recognize that this is going to bring a lot into the local economy. So.
Thanks for that question. We have another one back here. Was there another right in the middle?
Good afternoon. I just wanted to know, I guess for your, the law, like for the cannabis law that you're talking about, and how does that help with any entrepreneurs who want to get into that business? Is there any backing so that the community members can also get into that, or is this just ban-driven for communities or some? And then how long was the process for the licensing? I know it's been almost a year since it's been legalized, but did you start your work before that or after that happened? And then, yeah, just about band members as well. Is that I know band members in our reserve want to also start their own business. So what does your law look like for band members and not just for band business?
Yeah, so our current draft bylaw sets out the process for licensing in our community. So even if you're applying for a license, the nation needs to approve it. That's the way the province set it up. And this kind of sets out the guidelines on how we make that determination. But it was interesting when our community gave us direction to explore this. They wanted the nation to lead the way first. And eventually, if other community members open retail stores, that's fine. But this is something that they knew would benefit everybody rather than just one individual person in the community. So yeah, the bylaw does find ways to support local entrepreneurs. And in terms of timing, we've been right out the gate since it was legalized, basically applying, and it took quite a while. And again, I wish I showed you that slide. The province of BC is so far behind in the number of stores they opened. It's pretty frustrating, actually.
I don't know what's wrong. There we go. I can answer a little bit about that. In my private meetings with Farnworth, as you're having, and I know other First Nations groups are, and at the committee level, what I talk about is First Nations entrepreneurs and First Nations. We want assistance in capital and more, to help our people get into this industry as a nation or as an entrepreneur, off or on reserve. That's the kind of support I'm looking for, and pushing the government at all times to support First Nations people to get into the market, hands down.
Well, I'll give one more question. Right here in the middle, this gentleman in the black.
Hi, just a question about when you're talking about, the people that are showing up on our doorsteps, kind of the sharks looking for partners. Have you found a way to kind of figure out which ones are decent or the ones that definitely come with some ill intentions? Because I know I've sat in at a meeting and gone, you've got to be kidding me. This isn't real. And then you also, like with most agricultural products, there's boards and agencies that have that stamp of approval saying, this is almost like the triple B. Is there anything like that in the marijuana industry for production primarily?
Well, for us, before I started this journey, this is a 6-year process for me. So we've had people come into our community for when it was only medical cannabis. And I'd said the same thing, are you for real? But anyways, for in the industry, you got to do some due diligence on who's presenting whatever project. So we did some heavy due diligence, and usually half those people pitching are not who you want, working with you or your community or as a partner. And yeah, that's how we went about it.
Yeah, really quickly, again, I shared Purple Camas Consulting's the group that we worked with. For those of you might have saw in the media, Trees Dispensary, they had a bunch of issues before, but they created a separate group that knew how to apply first. They knew how to set up a store and work it efficiently. We did backgrounds on both of them. Other potential partners we had, we checked out their history and the people that they work with. And to be honest, the consulting company we worked with, they had great references from the local municipalities and other governments that said, hey, you know, this team knows what they're doing, and so.
Thanks. That was an excellent question. We have one more over here again.
Where does one apply to get a license?
For a license to produce, that's a federal jurisdiction, so that would be Health Canada. For storefronts, that would be up to each province. There is online applications for federal and applications provincially for the province. But in any case, it would be good to align yourself with somebody who has done these. I know you've just mentioned some people you've worked with, and or a simple way of partnering with somebody. If you have a beautiful location or meet certain things for growing, there's potential partnerships. There's actually some good companies out there to partner with. I know stores right now, you're allowed up to 8 stores per storefront, and for an LP, we're allowed as many as we want to build throughout Canada. So that's where we'd be looking at partnerships, strategic partnerships.
Really quickly, and this comes back to community members, right? Is doing your homework and who you work with. And I think it's, you know, we had a lot of those people that came to our community, and I was like, you know, is this really these people that want to work with us? They have no actual experience. They thought they had experience in it. But again, the company we worked with, they helped apply for 8 other licenses with other groups. They knew about the security. They knew about the storefront and all the things we couldn't do. They did their homework. And but again, I think that's about it for, you know, when I think about community members and when they want to get into the industry too, that they do their homework. And I think it's really important to work collaboratively with your local nation too, instead of just jumping right in. Because I think that's what happened in our community. One member was interested, and you know, they actually received more pushback because they were hoping that the community was hoping they'd work more collaboratively with us as a nation. So I think that's a big important piece, is working with your local government or your nation.
Good question, some good information. We're looking forward to Subway having some hash brownies. And we're reminding everybody they can't advertise, but we can. Stop in at Port Alberni's Orange Bridge for a gas and grass, or grass and gas, and help make Tseshaht First Nation a little more money. So thank you both for your presentations today. We have some gifts for you. Please give them a hand. And I'll be welcoming back to the stage Chief Edwards to present our last presenter of the day.
It's great information, new industry, and I think we all have to look at it seriously and talk to our community members about it. Our next presenter is Duncan. No, Derek. Sorry, Duncan was the other guy. But Duncan's going to give us some information on the, I guess they're not little black books, but they're very informative black books. They were handed out at our last BCAFN meeting. I looked through them. I'm actually going to use them at our community meetings to go through them to talk to our community members about how to go about business. So Derek Hansom is the Economic Development Policy Analyst for the BCAFN. He has an extensive background in community development, particularly in the area of child and family services. Derek completed an MBA in Indigenous Business and Leadership and has completed a number of roles and projects that enhance the capacity of the economic landscape. Derek is an elected councillor of the Squawell First Nation. So with that, Derek, I'll welcome you up.
One presentation on cannabis and start forgetting names and stuff, eh? I just want to, number one, thank everybody for being here. It's I know I'm the envy of all the presenters. It's a busy week and it's the start of a long weekend and it's about 4 o'clock. So I said I'd be very short, but they told me that we're good here until about 5:30. So I'm going to be fast. And quite honestly, what I wanted to do is just kind of provide a bit more context as it relates to the Black Books and kind of back things up a little bit. The Black Books are a tool, but they're part of a bigger process and a bigger portfolio and the work that's being done with BCAFN. So, excuse me, just really quickly, I mean, in terms of BCAFN priorities, they are wide-ranging. They become mandated through the Chiefs in Assembly. And as one piece of that relates to economic development and some of the work that we're doing. In terms of a bit of a snapshot or picture, going back to 2017 was the start of some work that related to economic development, work being led and supported through BCAFN. There's a few just, pieces here. One part of this relates to what we're doing today. Business forums, bringing people together, having conversations and sharing information, helping build networking opportunities. That's, one example. We have additional examples in here, and I'll kind of dig into a couple of those really quickly. One of which is Champions Table, bringing together, and this was mentioned by the regional chief this morning, bringing together First Nations leaders as well as CEOs. The cool part of this table is having kind of some innovative discussions, being able to have conversations that aren't led by whether it's provincial policy or federal policy, just talking about good business. It's a venue to be able to kind of have some of those discussions. That group is chaired by the regional chief, but in addition to that is chaired by the BC president, which is Greg Davignon, the Business Council of BC. And really, the work is backed by an MOU that was signed back in 2017. And in terms of a couple of deliverables out of there, there's an intern leadership program which is run through VIU, but it's open to any Indigenous graduate from any post-secondary institution in BC. It just happens to be housed at a VIU, which quite honestly we're grateful for because they've got some capacity in terms of being able to kind of support that program. So I just wanted to flag that as a piece. And the other one that's being done is a pilot project with the Chilcotin Nation. Some conversations about, given the fact of their court case, the title that they hold to their lands, to really do a bit of a dive into opportunities that they would like to see that can be supported from the Champions Table and it further explored. And the next step to that chunk of work will be a bit of an opportunity to kind of pull some of the learnings from that and make it open to a wider range for our First Nations communities from throughout the province. So here they are, the Black Books. And I want to apologize for this because what I had hoped for this was that we would have these here in your hands, being able to kind of highlight these and get them in your hands, get them out to communities. We've slowed the process down just a little bit. There's some revisions that we're making on them. We want them to be a product that's at a high standard. We don't want to start distributing these and realize that there's some pieces in there that we wanted to change. So we're doing a revision on these right now, and over the coming months, we're going to do a reprint on them. And the cool piece, the thing that I'm really happy about is that we'll do some sessions in communities. We'll do at least 4 different sessions throughout the province where we can actually present these. And instead of some of the regional sessions we had in the development of them, we can actually start talking about utilization of them, the rollout of them. How do we get these working for you? And so to me, this is kind of a bit of a plug for those sessions. It's a bit of a stay tuned, and the one thing that I'm really happy to do is make sure that we're bringing something that's top notch to our communities and making sure that it's useful, and make sure that we do have that conversation about how you make these a useful and utilized product. So that's this. I was going to dig into these in the presentation today, but really that's the message that I wanted to make sure that I brought to everybody, is to stay tuned for the sessions that we're going to have. We'll advertise. We can actually even do an email blast in terms of those that were present today. I will make sure that we send out notification about these sessions as we further plan them. So I'm going to skip through these because, again, this was some of the information that we heard in the development of the black books. And again, given the fact that we're going to be coming out again, we'll have a better opportunity to really kind of dig into these and dig into how the pieces that we heard got worked into the black books. Again, just a couple snapshots of some of the content that's in there. And this is a slide that we've used a couple times, but we've stolen. But I wanted to use it because just kind of given some of the conversations that we've had today, talking about where we are and what the opportunities are. When you kind of go back and think about, some of the pieces around impact benefit agreements and the work that's been done around trying to create economic opportunities has really gone from, nominal jobs, talking about, we want 5 people doing nominal jobs if we're going to sign an IBA with company to, hearing about some of the successful businesses that are out there right now. So, yeah, I just wanted to steal that and throw it in there. And I guess finally that I made mention of, a few years of work that BCFN was mandated and supported to do. And that led up to March of this year, the end of last fiscal year. And we were able to do some work and have some conversation with the province and be supported for another 2 years of work around the ECDEV strategy that we have. So in all that saying is this work is continuing. The pieces that I mentioned, including the business forums that we're doing today, including the black books, will continue on through the next 2 fiscal years. So stay tuned. We're around. Regional Chief does usually provide updates in terms of some of this work at our Chiefs Assemblies and at events like this. So we're behind the scenes doing a bit of work and making sure that we're able to bring products like the black books to everybody here and the communities out there. So I'll leave it at that. I'll keep it short. And I know we've got some closing stuff coming up. So thank you.
How's everybody doing? Good? We're almost done. So just a few comments. First, I just want to thank Chief Teegee and the team here for the opportunity to spend the day with you. This was a lot of fun, very informative for myself. And so my hands up to you, Chief, for the opportunity. And also to all of you for making this such an engaging day. You were very attentive, asked some great questions, and I felt like some of those panelists could have gone on with the conversation a lot longer. So thank you very much. What I take away from the day is the realization that in commerce, when it comes to business, is taking on new forms within our communities and within our nations. I remember when I started school some 20 years ago in academia, if you went into business or if you went into economic development, you were a sellout. That's harsh. Like, to call anybody a sellout, if you know where the history of that word and where it comes from and what it relates to, like, we should eliminate that word from our language and from our lexicon as Indigenous people, because we live in a complex world, and the things we have to navigate, the decisions we have to make, to just relegate somebody to a sellout because you don't want to engage in the debate and the intellectual discussion about what it means to be in business, what it means to be in commerce, what it means to even take your culture into the business world, is a very high level philosophical conversation that we have to be having. But 20 years ago, we didn't have it. We just said you're a sellout, and all the academia that I was reading at the time and instructed to write was to criticize free markets and capitalism as being detrimental to our communities and antithesis to our traditional ways. And then we come around 20 years later, it's like, no, we can actually change those markets, change those ideologies and the way the free market works to conform to our culture and our languages and our traditions and our way of being and living on the land. And I want to thank Professor Paredo, if she's still here, for that, turning that whole concept of entrepreneurism and business on its head, saying it's not just about profit. It's about community, it's about the land, it's about our culture, it's about so much more. And it's myopic to think that it's just about profit. And I think we're starting to realize that as Indigenous people. And by the world-class presentations we had here today, it's evident that the future is looking bright for Indigenous business and commerce within BC. And so my hands up to all the presenters and all the entrepreneurs in the room that made time to come out, and the leaders today that made time to come out for today's session. So thank you very much, and lim lim. And I want to say thank you to my co-chair, Chief Edwards. Thank you very much for the day.
Thank you. I also want to thank Chief Teegee for having these forums. Thank the staff for calling and asking if I would assist in co-chairing. So, I mean, what I got from the day is, and what I get from every day, is that we need to still have conversations with non-Indigenous business owners, operators, entrepreneurs, because we're still learning. I've been doing this for, I don't know, like 20, 25 years. And it starts out forestry, and we talked about resources and resource extraction, and can we be partners in those types of industries? And in my home community, we're still not part of that industry. And it was really because we didn't bring in experts to have that conversation. We have a forest license, but we haven't cut any trees, right? So those are some of the places that we're at collectively. But for my community, when we got involved in business, we ended up settling with BC Hydro, an agreement on past impacts. And with that came, you know, some settlement dollars, and banks love that. They like, you know, you can go to them and you can, you know, finance, you can leverage dollars from them, because they look at your settlement and say, oh, if you default on a payment, at least we know we know where to go and get one. So because my background is in natural resource management, we created an environmental restoration company, and we've become very good at it. We're doing it all over the province now, and it feels really right to be out there and restoring land and looking after it. And I see it as exercising my inherent right, jurisdiction, and authority to be managing my own lands. And I actually take advantage of that in meetings with government, with industry. I've let them know, you can't go out there now. We're doing research. We're studying grizzly bears. We're studying the movement of wolves. We're studying fish. We're looking at all of our plants. And until I know that it's a healthy environment, I'll come back and I'll let you know when you can come in and extract resources and how to extract resources. So we started making sustainable investments, local businesses that were for sale. Because we're a small community. We live in a small community, so we don't have the enterprise just to go out and start looking at big business. We, you know, purchased transportation companies. My brother is Chief Mike Labordi, And he always said, you know, the industries are, you know, you're always guaranteed that transportation, accommodation, and food, right? And I listened to that. And he was also the one that said, don't spend your own money. Don't be a fool. That was, and I was like, okay, I won't. You know, thanks for the advice, big brother. You know, so we bought a local trucking company, transportation company, and it employs about 10 people. It's not profitable, but it's actually employing people. It's creating sustainability and certainty that they have an income every 2 weeks and that they're getting paid for that. And, you know, and there's more substantial things that we did because I have to look after my community. That is my duty and my obligation, is to do that and make sure that our investments are solid, that I've had people come in and make sure that they're guiding us in those investments. So we, you know, in partnership, we purchased a run-of-the-river power plant. It's existing. It's a partnership with Interjex. And they're actually the majority owner. And it's not too often you find somebody who is a majority owner. They really had to pay out their ass, though, to become the majority owner. They had to do things for us that they, even our negotiator, I had to kick him in the negotiating room. He was crying. He did not want to go and ask for those things. Said, just get in there. All they can do is say no, right? So we got everything that we wanted out of that and more because we had a vision. You know, we knew what we wanted and they wanted something. I didn't need them. But actually, in the end, I did. You know, when we bought that, if that power plant broke down the next day, it would have cost us $10 million. We didn't have that, so that was the sole reason that they could be the majority owner of that power plant. And I was telling co-chair just the history of it, you know, and I love the history of the power plant and the land. You know, the gold that came out of there, the Chinese mining history. The Golden Cache Mine is what built East Hastings. That's what started Vancouver, was the money that came from my backyard. You know, so it's those types of things that when we're talking about business and economy and investing, you know, and you're talking about the experts that come in here, it's those types of things that I see and that I really have to sit and think about on, you know, are these the right investments that we're making? And I think they are, and it takes a lot. It took our CCP, that really drives a lot of it, like marijuana, that's on there. It's been on there for about 5 years. We asked our elders, you know, that's something that they said, yes, we know you can get into that industry. We know you can do it properly. You know, we got some land back. It's called Lot 450. The reserve is right beside Lot 450, so we're going to develop Lot 420, right? And we're going to, you know, it's going to be retail sales. And, you know, and those are the things sitting around. It's just those little innovative aspects of business, the creativity that can come out of it, that can actually be your big seller, your big market piece for these. And those are the types of things, if you have a vision, really follow it, right? And don't be afraid to call in people who can help you get there. Look for people who will be loyal to your community and help you get there, because they are out there. Some just want to come in, make some money, but some really understand your vision and want to help you get to that place. And that's who you need to seek out, and you'll find them, and they'll find you. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody that stayed this long and watched some of these presentations, listened to some of these presentations, and heard the presentations, because at the end of the day, we need to hear what is being said and take that home and turn that into prosper, successful communities, healthy, very healthy communities. So thank you. Kukstem.
Thank you. Thank you for saying all TGIF. It is a long weekend, and I certainly want to get you going, but just have a few words in closing. Just want to give a hand from Ernesto Ciroli this morning to Duncan, right? To Derek Hansom, all the presenters today. Thank you for coming here and exchanging knowledge.
The theme of this was reawakening Indigenous trade and business, commerce. And I think today it was much more trading knowledge and education in terms of what is going on with the federal government, what are some of our councils are doing in terms of technology. We need technology and infrastructure. That's a new reality for business. And if we don't have it in our communities, we're left at a handicap in terms of economic development. Our last two presenters on cannabis exchanged what their experience are in terms of the new emerging market of cannabis. Just a note on that, we do have a working group on cannabis provincially with the province of British Columbia, and we just started the Chiefs Committee on Cannabis, which is a national initiative from the Assembly of First Nations. We're really working on an aggressive timeline to bring everybody up to speed. Different jurisdictions have different ideas on how to deal with cannabis from each province. It does differ. But nevertheless, there is the actual legalization, the federal legalization of cannabis. So I just want to thank all the presenters today. Thank you for being here. This is trading knowledge, trading education of your journey, of your experiences in terms of business, commerce, because it does come back to what I was saying this morning, that it's all related. The more economically viable companies that we own are flourishing, it really eases the burden to take care of those issues that we deal with every day in our communities. The child welfare issue, the housing issue, those issues for our people to be gainfully employed, and even revenues that can become a lot more useful to our people if we do have a lot of funds. So I think it's quite important that this be part of the conversation. This, in essence, is a way to some level of freedom in terms of making decisions, especially in the era of reconciliation. I had a very positive, fruitful discussion this morning with our Premier, John Horgan. We're very excited knowing that the declaration will be implemented as legislation. I think we should all be excited in this room. I think British Columbians should be excited that we'll be the first jurisdiction to implement the declaration as legislation. That really opens the door. I think that this is a very positive step, and I'm thinking that this is going to be one of those watershed days that we realize that the relationship is changing for the better for our Indigenous people. It'll be like June 26, 2014, when we saw the Chilcotin win that court case in the Supreme Court of Canada, recognizing title, that the Chilcotin had title, and their declaration was upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada. That day is coming, and it will be exciting because that's part of the conversation. And the many articles in the declaration where really it's our assertion of our sovereignty and our assertion of self-determination. So with that said, I thank you for your journeys home. Lastly, thank you to our co-chairs, Chief Derickson, Chief Michelle Edwards. Not only are they chiefs and dealing with many boards and different initiatives, this could be your side hustle, to be chairs of meetings. You've did a great job. Thank you. As a token of our appreciation, here are a couple of gifts. Great job. Lastly, just recognize that we're leaving this territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, the unceded, unsurrendered, and continually occupied territory of the Coast Salish people. Want to thank them, and safe journeys home. Go home, see your family, and hold them tight. And thank you all. Masaicho.